Hello and welcome. Really great addition for our Corvive Coaches Corner. I was fortunate enough when my youngest son Tyler was a athlete at Vanderbilt to watch this now coach, former SEC Freshman of the Year, three-time USA participant for the USA teams, 3 Golden Gloves, just an all-around elite outfielder for the University of Kentucky, now recruiting coordinator at his alma mater, University of Kentucky, Austin Cousino. Coach, thank you so much for taking the time to join me tonight. I'm really excited to speak with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Like I said, make that intro shorter.
Well, I will tell you, I watched, during that era, we could all make an argument. I think that was some of the best baseball. South Carolina had won 2 World Series. LSU was coming back. Kentucky was, I think at the time, 2012, 2013, either number 1 or number 2 for most of the season, had a ton of big leaguers on it. But you were the leadoff guy. You were the kind of the spark that made the engine tick. Talk a little bit about your memories as a student athlete that you try to share with your current student athletes, but not only that, with your future recruits as well.
Yeah, like you said, now what a time to play in the league, right? You'll remember this. They switched to BB Core bats,
Yeah,
and they were still using the high seams. We used to say you were hitting cinder blocks, and some of those curveballs that what is it, South Carolina University of Slurves and Curves, and
rock.
Ole Miss.
Right.
Yeah, I think Price was one of them. It felt like, man, Ole Miss always had a couple of 6'5" righties, and they came. You knew a curveball was coming, you still couldn't hit it. But man, some really good players, teams at that time, and a lot of them, are still playing the game at the highest level. So my time at Kentucky, obviously amazing, great group of guys, similar to what you just said. You guys, Luke Maley, Taylor Rogers, Trevor Gott, JT Riddle, a ton of big leaguers, but just great dudes. And we had a blast. Loved to play the game. And really, like I said, I believe at the time, the first time a number 1 ranked Kentucky team. So it's been cool now to come full circle to, come back here. Obviously, what Coach Mingione has, done, the new stadium and, first ever super regional, first ever Omaha, the SC championship team in 24. Just kind of a dream to come back and do those things as a player and or as a coach and watch, the guys you recruit do that. So
One of the really great and I think extremely beneficial aspects of your career is not only were you a student athlete at the SEC level and ultimately drafted 3rd-round Mariners, but you've been a athlete, a scout, a college coach, and now back to becoming your alma mater recruiting coordinator. So you've truly seen this whole baseball process from becoming a high school athlete, college athlete, Team USA, the draft, and now as a scout and now as a coach. What is that like when you're out evaluating? What did those years as a major league scout allow you to learn about evaluating student athletes for Kentucky?
Yeah, great question. I think the main thing is perspective, right? I remember the first time, getting done playing, getting into coaching, and I had this conversation with Billy O'Connor maybe a couple of days ago, a week ago, and we were laughing. I said, "Man, you sent me out that first summer recruiting," and I said, "I can't believe I actually found you a couple ball players." I coached for 1 year, and man, he threw me out to the wolves, and I think, I believe I spent parts of 6 weeks between June and July bopping between Atlanta and Hoover and Cincinnati and camps. And at that time, all I had was to draw on my previous experiences as a player, that transition time from, okay, I'm done playing. What am I going to do? Am I going to sell insurance? Am I going to, go back to school? And I got to try to, make a ton of money. And, fortunately for me, I came back and, was a graduate assistant at Mississippi State in 2018 and then Xavier in 2019, scouted in the Midwest with the Tigers 2020 through 22, and then the Rays in 23. And so a lot of great baseball minds, people who helped me get to where I am. you get to learn enough to think you got it figured out, but you got to stay humble enough to realize that, you got to keep working. And, there's so much you can see. It's really easy to go to a ball field and, hey, this guy can do this, this, and this, but ultimately you're trying to figure out who can play the game. And there's a lot that the eyes can't measure is what I like to say now.
One of the things I would love your opinion on is obviously, we know in the December 1st timeline now is a little bit different as far as, a cap being associated with a Division I roster, particularly, at the SEC level. How are you managing with regard to recruiting? Are you kind of trying to stay within that number of 34 to say 35, 38 to bring guys in the fall, compete, have inter-squad, things like that? What is it different now with regard to recruiting, say, this season as opposed to your year at a couple years at Mississippi State, Xavier, and Kentucky?
Yeah, well, I believe the rosters post-COVID, I was scouting, so I believe they bumped up to 40. Does that
40.
sound right?
Yeah, right.
So 40. So that the summer of 23, when I came back, obviously learned from Coach Minge, obviously Coach Roselle at the time, Coach Ammo, just learn, okay, here are some of the things that, have changed in the 4 years since I was coaching. And so getting the lay of the land with that, you're looking forward. And then you hear this buzz, hey, what are we going to go to? We're going to 38. Is there a transition period? Are we going to 34, 35? And so, when we got a lot of clarity this summer, you're sitting there and, fortunately for us, we were in a good spot. We got crushed a little bit by the high school draft with some commits at the time, right. and which can be a blessing and a curse, as you've been in this situation before, right. And you're sitting there not knowing what's going to happen. And that's where those networks of, scouts and relations with advisors and agents of just, okay, what's the pulse, right? Can I do this? Can I go out and get that? For us, we err on the side of, for the most part, under recruiting and adding a little bit later, through the portal, because, you don't have to have those tough conversations. The summer, obviously getting the DSAs and being able to have a little transition period here to allow those DSAs to, ultimately give them more time to figure out if, this is ultimately the place for them or if somewhere else will be. And so you're always trying to be innovative. Fortunately for us, the December 1 cutoff, all of our players this year are able to, with the DSA tag, make our team moving forward. Like, we'll see. We haven't experienced the full summer yet of, being in the portal and knowing if that DSA tag hits that 34, which for those who, don't know, that allows you to go over the limit. And so I think that, the thing we're trying to do is like, when we get information, like everyone, I feel like we're getting it on Twitter. Like, I think some people, it's like, you're getting information earlier right. than us. It's like, we're really not, we get little, tidbits and nuggets or a little birdie in our ear, and you're like, okay, but until that Twitter account tweets it out, we're kind of in a holding pattern at times as well. But for us, like, to go back to it, just making sure that when we're evaluating, we're making sure we're adding them for the right reason. And we have to build that team, and you're looking a little bit more 1 year in advance than 2 and 3 and 4 than maybe what it was with the the early recruiting.
Right. So on that topic, if you're a 2027 or 2028, when are they coming into your windshield? Meaning, when are you really starting to say, okay, I'm going to go out and take a look at this guy? Is it when they're in their junior spring in high school going into their senior summer? Is it the sophomore summer going into their junior fall? When do you typically like to start to evaluate your potential high school recruits?
Yeah, great question. So right now, doing a ton of the 2028s, right? We're going through all the services and PG and PBR, and for me, I'm video evaluating them. I'm watching their gait when they run the 60. I'm watching their timing, their load, right? The services are doing such a great job now of getting high quality video, and so you're really doing the same thing we did scouting. We're preffing out guys that fit our mold. Are they with organizations that we have good relationships? If not, can we figure out a way to get to them to camp? Right now, like you said, with 27s, we're going back and seeing, like, hey, maybe who's kind of getting lost in the weeds, right? Like there's a lot of really good ball players now who, like I said, maybe there's schools that, maybe saw them, but maybe a little hesitant because of a spot or, whatever it may be. And now, you got 26s that are going to make a jump in the next 6 months.
Right.
And so I think, that evaluation process, are we getting names early and we're gathering for sure. Right. But then it's like, let's not forget, like, what's right ahead of us. I had a really great conversation with one of my buddies, an advisor, go back and look at, maybe some of the incoming freshman rankings and go compare those to, what that class looked like as a sophomore. And it's probably going to be a little bit different, 2.5 years later. So
one of the things that, you mentioned gait, and I try to get parents to understand over and above analytics, metrics, those types of things that probably are easy to assemble from an information perspective. But from your scouting perspective, you're looking at how an athlete moves with regard to being fluid in his movements, athletic in his movements, arm path, things of that nature. Can you explain that, not only from a scouting perspective, but obviously as a college recruiting coordinator? You're watching athletes as they develop. You mentioned the 28. You're going to watch them this summer. Then the following summer, you're looking for a progression, but you're looking for fluid, athletic, competitors. Talk a little bit about that when it comes to evaluating athletes.
Yeah. So, what I learned really early in scouting is, like when you write a follow and evaluation, you turn a player in, right? Like, how do you describe him? Right. And so what I learned from early scouting day, you go out there, it's, hey, tall frame, thin body, or, tall on a large frame, extra thin, wiry frame, life to the operation as a pitcher, right? Present weakness throughout, as a hitter, we can use an event, you go to an event and it's like, describe their timing, their load, describe their feel for the barrel, describe the bat path, describe the misses, where are the sprays, what's their approach, where's the ball going, how's the spin coming off the bat, right? How is, the lower half, you're describing all those different things. So you have, a memory when you go back at the end of the night of that day. It's like, okay, this is what I wrote, tall, lean bodied, left-handed hitter, knee to knee load, hand timing, direct path through the ball with a gap to gap approach, good feel for the barrel. Maybe we put a 2 on him. Then that night, we talk to the staff, hey man, this guy took a good BP. I like him. There's good hands, maybe corner profile, left-handed hitting bat, maybe you go back and see how you didn't run as good, but like, oh man, like it's weak. You go watch the way he runs. It's like, there's this whole formula and you're kind of doing all this thing. And then, next thing that's the showcase, right? Then you got the game and you're watching, what's he doing with, his pre-pitch timing on deck, how's he, that's the one thing you can't see in videos. Like I just love watching the guys, like, what do they do right after they swing or take a pitch or they're, what are they doing with their body? Are they doing something? It's like this, this whole formula you're coming up within your brain to try to look into the future and how they're responding to, to certain events at just in the game. And ultimately you got to rank those guys and decide, man, like, who do I like? Can this guy play? You go in circles. Sometimes you can make it as easy as, man, I love this guy because it's a left-handed hitter with, juice and power and he can run. It's like, man, that's pretty easy. Other times it's hard. You get done the day and, sometimes I remember I learned from an old scout who coached me on a scout team. He said, you got to sleep on it. Whatever you write on that evaluation that night, he goes, just sleep on it and reread it in the next morning. He goes, and you can't make impulsive decisions. And, that's a big thing, long-winded, coach, but you're just trying to describe the player and ultimately how does this guy fit in and how's he going to get on the field and how's he going to help you win games and how's he going to get his name in the lineup card or, those things from a recruiting standpoint. And then you get to know the kids and the families and kind of, map out the intangibles.
One of the things that I think you probably have a really good perspective on, and I try when I'm talking with parents specifically, and I try to tell them college baseball now across all of college baseball, it's a big boy business. and you have to be able to compete. And when you start talking about things like, intangibles and competitiveness, at the end of the day, to get between the lines, you have to be able to do two things. One, you have to execute, right? So you have to be able to be mentally tough, and you have to execute. Can you talk about specifically at the University of Kentucky within the SEC? That is arguably the best conference in the country. You have to be ready to execute. When you or Nick or any member of the staff put you between the lines, you have to be ready for your opportunity. Can you talk a little bit about that when you're recruiting athletes? About, okay, recruiting is the first step, but getting between the lines, well, that's a big jump, to get between the lines on an SEC roster.
Yeah, great question. Like you said, in that for us, when we go through the recruiting process, they're going to talk to every coach on our staff, right? They're going to talk to me. They're going to talk to Coach Roselle. They're going to talk to Coach Sloan. They're going to talk to Coach Mingione, right? And ultimately, we're going to try to figure out, right, like, who this kid is, what's important to him, how does he fit into the things that are important to us, his personality, his communication. We're trying to figure out, like, really how resilient is he going to be when he gets here. Right. And like you said, you don't know how anyone's going to respond. Right. You just like we don't have this crystal ball for development. That's why there's 5'8" right-handed hitting, outfielders that are, that play for 10 years. Right. And everyone's like, well, it's like he defies all the odds of what someone goes and looks at in the game. He couldn't run. He got no power. He can't throw. It's like, man, coming up on 10 years of service time. Right. Like, like you said, with those intangibles. And so, to get in between the lines, right? Obviously, like I said, the skill set for the most part, majority of the players in our conference have that skill set, right? Like that's not too difficult for the guys in our league to find. I think that based off the history of the draft picks, the regionals, the wins, the big leaguers, like you could go on. But man, I think for us, and ultimately what you want, like, you got to put them in environments every day to compete, to be resilient. So when that, that game starts in the spring and you get punched a little bit, like, you're able to respond. And so Coach, like you said, Coach Minge has done an incredible job here of getting our players to learn how to compete every day through different hitting standards, through different challenges with machines and just, things that we do to get the guys, like I said, understand there's a scoreboard and there's a standard, but also it's like, like, hey, we're going to put this breaking ball machine, it's coming this part of the zone. And you know what, like we talked about earlier, like there's going to be pitchers. It's like, here it is, buddy, like good luck. Right. And so just doing our best to recreate the game in practice so that we can, help them respond when the lights turn on.
So one of the most often asked questions is from parents particularly, is it worth going to Kentucky camp? Is it worth going to these camps? They're not really recruiting a lot of high school athletes anymore. What's the point of going to camps? And my response is always twofold. One, you go there to learn. Those coaches are going to teach you something that you may not be getting in high school or travel baseball, what life or what practice life is like at the University of Kentucky. But the other part of it is just as much as you get to see athletes, they get to see and speak with you. Talk about the dynamic as a recruiting coordinator, the role that camps play at the University of Kentucky.
Yeah, camps are huge. I don't know if there's a coach that would say, man, coming to a camp is not beneficial for the staff, the program, and the family.
Right.
We have a ton of guys in our program who've come to camps. We've had guys that have gone to smaller schools and transferred here who came, up through our camps. We have guys who have come to camps and they've committed after. And so the one, like you said, the one takeaway that's super important, they're going to learn. They're not going to leave a camp at Kentucky and not be better from a drill, a skill set, an interaction with the coach. Most importantly, they're going to get feedback from us in terms of their measurables and, the things that we see that they need to work on. Secondly, they're not going to be able to get on a field and interact with us and get instructed by us anywhere else. The entire coaching staff, our entire staff is at every single camp. And so if you're looking to obviously get eyes by everyone, man, there's just not a ton of places you get that opportunity. And the third thing that I always say, and this doesn't just apply to Kentucky, but, the big thing, we want to have a relationship and make sure that, anyone can sign up, right? So we're not opening and closing our camps to try to get them down. Like obviously that's just not what we do. And so the big thing for us, okay, you have interest. Can you see yourself here geographically? Do we offer the academics and the programs that interest you? Maybe pick out a school close to home, maybe a school in, maybe the MAC, maybe you go to a Big Ten camp, maybe you go to ACC camp, maybe you go to the Big East camp and, pick out 3 a year. Okay. I like this school. They have this program, this coach, and man, that $400 to $500 that you're spending to go see 3 schools, 3 campuses, 3 different sizes, 3 geographic territories, 3 different staffs, man, like how is that not going to be beneficial if you have to, do a little bit on your own to get your name out there for sure. And the next thing would then the network of coaches that I know that could potentially be a benefit to another kid coming to our camp. And, we'll look back and 2 weeks later and he's at someone else's camp. And now we're talking about someone that's been at both of our camps to help each other. So, to reiterate what you said, they're going to learn. That's the biggest thing. They're going to get to know our staff, man, and they're going to get feedback of just where they stand. And if it's not a possibility right now, man, it could be down the road.
So this is our big Core Vive question of the week. And I know you can answer this because this is a great perspective as a former athlete, 3-year starter, SEC freshman of the year. Okay, you're a student athlete. You're being recruited by Kentucky, or you think you're a Division I caliber athlete. What are you telling those athletes? How should they be getting prepared above and beyond baseball, skill set development to be ready when their feet hit campus in August or September of their freshman year?
Yeah, the number one thing that we've done is we've sent all of our committed players to go play college summer ball the summer before, right? Playing this game is, ultimately, like you said, you got to get in between the lines, which means the game's got to be played, right? And so, we talk about this, right? The facility, the hitting, the training, like ultimately you're doing all these things. So like when the game starts, like we can play the game, right? And so we're going to obviously, as you know, how we play, man, like it's ultra aggressive. Our guys are going to learn how to run and steal bases and take the extra base. And like, man, we're going pedal to the metal. We're going to have some super athletes out there that are really applying pressure. Like we play brains and guts, man. That's what Coach Minge wants is guys that can go out and do a lot of different things. And so, when you do that, you're obviously recruiting that caliber of player. But the biggest thing is, man, like you got to play this game. And so you got to go out there and you do it. I see sometimes people are like, man, college summer ball versus the facility. And there's no right or wrong, but there's guys who, like I said, man, like maybe they need to train a little bit differently and they need to put on weight and 70 games, in the summer isn't great. But ultimately, right, like, there is a scoreboard and wins and losses matter. And so does player development. Those things don't, it doesn't, mean one takes over the other.
Right.
But if you were to say, hey, like the number one thing for the most part is go out there and get challenged so that first, taste of failure is not the first fall here, which is the most difficult fall.
I always try to stress to parents, I never liked the whole step ladder of 14U, 15U, 60. I mean, that's just not the way it is in high school. It's certainly not the way it is in college. And I love the fact that a lot more colleges are pushing their, recruits to play at the college summer league level during the summer. My last question to you would be, okay, I'm the parent of a 2027, a 2028, as scary as this sounds, a 2029, and I think I really want to play college baseball. What advice would you give to them on how to best prepare? Is it make sure you're physical? Is it make sure your attention to athleticism and mobility? What advice would you give to those freshmen, sophomore, and juniors currently in high school to be fully prepared for the college baseball experience?
Yeah, I'd say the number one thing, like I said, is just that level of passion and commitment, right? If you've got that love, like I said, if your son, has an opportunity to go out there and obviously play the game he loves, as you want your kids to do what they want to do, right? And so as parents, as like, man, we'll do whatever we can to help our kids achieve their dreams, but they've got to want it. So that's the first thing and foremost. If they do right, like I talked about, are you doing those things in the weight room? Are you setting up the program in the off season, right? Are you being smart? Are you getting with people who have lived this game and been a part of it, right? From a strength and conditioning and nutrition standpoint. Are you training with someone specifically on the swing or delivery? Where are you working out? All those things are super important. The next thing I would say is, right, like recruiting process and development it's not linear, right? And so just because you're 29, right, like you said, it's, man, this guy's going to that camp or this guy's ranked. It's like, sometimes you got to have some horse blinders while also, like talked about, like, putting yourself out there. And you do, like, I think the feedback you can get from, okay, I'm going to go to this camp. All right. Like you look around, okay, man, that guy can run. You're like, that's natural instinct to look around a little bit. And like, you should have a gauge of it, of some feedback of kind of where you stand to reassess and reevaluate. Okay. Like now I got to get back and work on this. They said I need to run faster. Okay. Maybe I got to put on some more weight here. Maybe I got to lose some weight. All right. Maybe I got to spend more time, on the swing here. They said, man, my path is steep and cutty. All right. I'm working 2 uphill. All right. Now that we're getting with a hitting guy to change that. But also, man, we've had some really cool stories when I talk about like player development not being linear, of some guys who have taken a lot of different paths to get to Kentucky. But also, man, I think the cool thing is, every winter I'll go through this exercise. I'll look up top prospects and big leaguers. I'll go look at guys who are really doing well in the minors. And I'm fascinated to see some of the paths of guys who started at JCs and then went to a mid-major and struggled and ended up at a D2. And then they got a free agent sign because they hit 470 with 20 homers. And now they're in high A, and I'm like watching their swing and we're evaluating. It's like, man, like this guy didn't give up. You know what I mean? Like that guy wasn't trying to get an offer from Kentucky when he was 14. Right. And sometimes, right, like we talk about, like, this league and how amazing this school is and the experience, for sure, like those things, because I've lived it, I've been a part of it from, like you said, different perspectives as a scout, as a player, now as a coach, but we can never lose sight. Like if you have that passion and love and commitment and dedication, man, like you'll do whatever, you can to ultimately stay on that field and compete to win. And I love that. I love following those stories because ultimately that's what comes out in between the lines. One
of the things I really want you to end with, and I think I can ask you this only because you and my son are the same age, and every once in a while when he's talking to a young high school guy or a parent that he calls might start to get the hot balloon effect and start to elevate their mind. Can you please just share your opinion of what a weekend is like from March 15th through Hoover, every weekend in the SEC? What is it like facing, Kevin Gosman, and you just start going through those grind? I mean, I try to tell parents when you go, like, I can remember like going to Starkville, going to Oxford, going into Lexington, Columbia, etc. It's almost like it's like a big league vibe, but I want you to talk about the talent. Can you just talk about it as a player? I know you're a coach and you have to kind of stay down here, but what is it like as a player traveling in the SEC, and what is the talent really like?
Yeah, it's really an experience so unique. Because you've lived it, so you know it, from the ballparks, the fans, the draft picks, the news, the media, now Twitter and Instagram reels and all these outlets and publications. Like it's just continued to grow, which is awesome, right? Like our sport growing, like I will never not be a proponent of a student athlete deciding to come to college baseball, more specifically this league, into experience. As like I remember my first Thursday night practice with the lights on, right? And you're flying charter, right? And you've got people heckling you, and we did have Twitter back when I played. I'm not that old, less followers back
but it was
then.
called Twitter back then.
Yeah, it was called Twitter back then. It's not Twitter anymore. But like, there's just this rush every year that I've been able to do this. 3 years playing. 1 year as that graduate assistant at Mississippi State, and now 2 years back here. It's almost like, man, like, people talk about this league and until you until you're in it, until you're in the dugout, even I can remember last year we opened up at Georgia, and it's like, man, like it's still like there's a different buzz. The balls are different, the lights are different, and like you talked about, you brought up Kevin Gosman. Like that was an 0 for 5 night with 4 punchies that night when we played LSU. So I prefer not to, bring up thing about that weekend, but that's exactly why you do this. And I can remember when I was being recruited by schools in this league, and going to games, and I can remember, the Drew Pomerantz pitching, and I can remember thinking like, I want to face this guy. Yeah, I was like, I want to face this guy. It's like, if you want that, then this is where you come. There's no other place you're gonna get it. And so, it's just like you said, it's one of a kind. You can see now the investments top to bottom. Like it's fascinating.
Right.
I mean, even you talk about Kentucky, a $49 million ballpark. You see some other schools. It's like, man, this is what it's come to.
Right.
It's like, this is what, the next step would be, is if you have those desires to move into professional baseball and play this game for a long time. But it is surreal, to get in that dugout. And like I said, the buzz, man, is just different. It's just different.
Well, Austin, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to share not only your experience as an athlete, but more importantly now as a coach at the University of Kentucky, recruiting coordinator. And if you if somebody's watching, they think, well, I think I can play for Kentucky, are they sending you an email, a DM on X, or how are they going to get in touch with you?
Yeah, just, like I said, X, you shoot me a DM, and obviously there's rules on ages, and the big things, hey, we can see it, we can watch the video. Here's my profile, and whether it be a service or site, here are some coaches, some references, here's who I'm playing for. Those are the main things. Typically, like I said, the guys who show interest, man, I would love for you to come to a camp, get in front of us, come hang out with our staff, see, beautiful stadium, great people, great city. But really, like I said, that's the main way I look at all of them. There's not a DM that I don't, see. And, I can't always reply and respond to them per the rules, but I'm watching them all. So you can guarantee that.
Well, I love the city of Lexington. I loved going there. I loved everything, obviously, about the University of Kentucky, and most importantly, the SEC. Anything and everything to do with the staff, the complete staff, the schedule, the camps will be located in the Baseball Blue Book. If you have a profile, you want to go check out the University of Kentucky's profile in the Baseball Blue Book. Again, it's been around since 1909. I will make sure that I have Austin's information in both the podcast as well as the YouTube clips and video, so that you'll be able to reach out to Coach Cousino. Austin, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Yeah, like I said, it was a blast. Thanks for having me on.
All proteins are not the same. I encourage you to choose a grass-fed whey protein. The cattle have a cleaner diet, grazing on natural grass, which is going to mean that it's going to have higher branched chain amino acids, also your omegas and your CLAs. I'm telling you, it matters from a recovery standpoint. Choose the best protein and you're going to see the best gains and the best recovery. I'm telling you, athletes, make a wise choice, because it matters what you put in your body.